Instant destruction in Gaza City this morning after an evacuation warning. No injuries reported this time. But this now the very place which Israel's security cabinet has agreed to take control of. The approved plan focuses very specifically here on the largest city in the enclave, home to hundreds of thousands of people. Some here say they'll refuse to move again, having returned to their homes after being displaced before.
Yes, as just said right there, overnight the Israeli security cabinet voted in favor of the complete occupation of Gaza City, paving the way for the eventual, perhaps inevitable takeover of the entire strip. They had a meeting, it was somewhat divisive, it lasted for 10 hours. There was apparently heated debate between Netanyahu, who clearly wants to take over the entirety of the strip, cleanse it, all of that, and the leader of the IDF, Eyal Zamir, who's warned that a military occupation of the entire strip would endanger the lives of the remaining Israeli hostages inside of Gaza. According to 4 Israeli security officials, he also shared concern about the current level of exhaustion and fitness of reservists, and about the military becoming responsible for governing millions of Palestinians. Now, I think as we're gonna get to, it's not only the head of the IDF, but also many of the families of the hostages that believe this increasing military conquest of Gaza would endanger the hostages, which obviously would be a good reason to not do it if the goal was to recover the hostages. But if your goal was to just militarily conquer Gaza, then yeah, this is what you're gonna have to do. And Netanyahu has been very clear about which of those two is actually driving his actions. And so they have not okayed the entire strip being conquered just yet, just Gaza City as of right now. But the 5 principles, which we're gonna show you right here, that Netanyahu's office said the security cabinet agreed to, make clear that this military operation is not going to just end with Gaza City. You can see they're saying there are 5 principles for ending the war: Israeli security control in the Gaza Strip, disarming Hamas, returning all the hostages, including the bodies of those who've died, the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, and establishing an alternative civil administration that is neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. And of course, as a matter of fact, basically, they already control the vast majority of Gaza. Depending on who you talk to, it's somewhere between 75% that Israel says it controls. The UN says about 86% or so are either militarized or under evacuation orders, and this is only going to increase that. As was said in the video, of course, Gaza City in particular has a very large population, something around 1 million currently living there. It was smaller before the invasion of Gaza, but of course many people have been herded into there. And so it looks like they're taking another big step. I suppose, Cenk, they could have voted in favor of the complete annexation of Gaza. So I suppose this is better than that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, okay. No, I don't find that interesting at all.
We'll cover that in a month.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Look, guys, there's 2 major things happening here, and then I'll break down some of the important details. One is Israel is trying to conquer land in the modern world while still pretending to be part of the West and civilized society, etc. And it's going to be really interesting to see if they can pull that off. Like, now, I'm not talking about the moral outrage, I'm gonna get to that in a second. But in just like looking at it from a historical perspective, is it possible for Russia and Israel in the year 2025 to just say, we don't care about the people that are our neighbors, we're just gonna murder them and take their land? So that's what Russia's doing in Ukraine. That's what Israel's doing in Gaza right now. And they're also doing it in the West Bank, just slower, right? And Israel's announced their intentions over and over again to take the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So they don't necessarily do an official pronouncement like this, but their cabinet ministers say it. Netanyahu talks about greater Israel. Netanyahu's talked about from the river to the sea. Netanyahu has brought a picture of the greater Israel to the United Nations in giving a speech. Miriam Adelson, as reported by the Israeli press, backed Donald Trump so that Trump would allow Israel to annex the West Bank. You didn't hear that wrong. The West Bank, let alone Gaza, right? So here's Israel in the middle of the whole world on the stage going, yes, we're starving them to death, moving them to a camp, and yes, former Israeli Prime Minister has called it a concentration camp. And we're gonna squeeze them all out. We're gonna take this land for ourselves. So now you're gonna see a little bit later in the show that Trump said it was starvation, and Netanyahu called him furious and saying, "How dare you ever disagree with anything I said?" Okay, so we're gonna find out, can Israel, now that people are seeing it happen, control America 100% and take this land and murder those people and drive them out and get away with it? So that's what they're trying to do. We're gonna get to world reaction in a second. So number two thing is, I need you to understand this because it is not at all clarified in almost any of the articles. You have to go to paragraph 37 to find out this information on like a quarter of the articles. As John alluded to, they're gonna have to move 1 million Palestinians in Gaza City to do this. How do you think that's gonna go? Do you think that's gonna go humanely from the people who murdered 1,400 people waiting in line for food just recently? By the way, that's more people than Hamas killed on October 7th. If I hear Netanyahu talking about how October 7th is the greatest tragedy known to humankind, as he's done over 50 October 7th in Gaza, including on starving people waiting in line for food, I'm gonna vomit. And the whole world is vomiting right now. I don't know, for supporters of Israel, how you think this is helping you. You have to be mental. You freshly escaped from a mental asylum to think that this helps Israel's reputation, longevity, creating a safe haven for Jews, etc. right? So that moving those 1 million Palestinians is going to be a slaughterhouse. So that's why even the head of the IDF is like, really? And by the way, the head of the IDF is a terrible guy. Not only did he do all these massacres, is he responsible for the slaughter in Gaza, but earlier in 2018, when the Palestinians tried something that was nonviolent, going up to the gate that is keeping them prisoners in Gaza, he ordered their assassinations. He murdered 150 innocent people that were going up to the gate, including an American journalist. Sniper shots. So he's among the worst guys on the planet. And even he's saying to Netanyahu, are you nuts? Now it's not gonna be 150 or 1,400. We're gonna just kill like an endless parade of human beings to move 1 million Palestinians and take Gaza. You had to be out of your mind. And Netanyahu and the terrorists that are in the Israeli cabinet were like, yeah, we don't care. What do you think we did this for, you schmuck? What, to get rid of Hamas? What do you? Don't tell me you're a naive fool. We don't care about Hamas at all. To get the hostages back, who cares? Let them get killed. No, we're taking Gaza. Get it through your head. The whole point of this slaughterhouse is take the land to set up greater Israel. So that's super obvious. I'm happy to have a discussion about it, but I think that all rational people can now see that, I hope, but we'll find out. So, and then now the details real quick before we get to Mark. Okay, in their so-called peace negotiations, they say that they want Israeli security control of the entire Gaza Strip. That means occupy the entire Gaza Strip. Where's the compromise? The whole point was the ceasefire the entire time has been Hamas saying, we'll give the hostages back if you give us some prisoners and get out of Gaza, right? Israel's been pretending, oh yeah, maybe one day we'll get out of Gaza. Sure, yeah, which is the whole point of ending this thing, that you eventually leave Gaza and let the Palestinians govern themselves. Of course he's not gonna do that. So his offer is complete and utter surrender and humiliation, and you get nothing and I get everything. And then the last part was that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, in fact, no Palestinian is allowed to govern Gaza. Well, who the hell is gonna govern it then? Oh, let me guess, Israel. And then of course, like the absolute lie of all lies that all of American press will now repeat, and I've seen it in all the articles. Well, Israel says that after they take all of Gaza, they will one day return it to the Palestinians. I mean, you gotta be the world's biggest sucker to believe that. I mean, it's a preposterous thing to say, let alone believe. So every part of this is just as bad as it can be. And finally, you get to the hostages. So what they're doing here is they're calling Hamas's bluff. They're saying, we don't think you're gonna kill them. We don't think there's anything you could do. So we're gonna come in and you have no hope for peace left, okay? We just told you, our only offer is complete and utter surrender, humiliation, allow us to take Gaza, and write it down, by the way, sign off on us owning Gaza. Nobody's gonna do that, and no one should do that, okay? So now that there are no options left, at some point, if Hamas is to be believed, they have to kill the terror. They have to kill the hostages, which is stomach churning and awful. And I hope they don't. I hope to God they don't. But Netanyahu's saying, go ahead, kill them. I don't care about them. Do you think I cared about the people who died on October 7th in Israel? You think I cared about the 61,000 people I murdered in Gaza? No, the whole point is I murder a lot of people and then I take your land. And that's the offer I have for you. So I hope Hamas was bluffing and they don't kill those hostages. But now that the percentage chance of them getting killed is sky high because of this. Mark, curious about your thoughts.
Well, I'm kind of would disagree with you on your take on the notions that Netanyahu is obviously a despicable, demonic figure in modern life. His view is something we can all only guess at. But on the Hamas thing, I think he's not figuring, look, we don't think you're going to kill the hostages. I think he thinks just the opposite. We think you are going to kill the hostages. In other words, nothing we can do can save these hostages. Therefore, I'll continue with this policy, and that's where I would agree with you, this policy that makes no sense. It's really the re-annexation of Gaza, as you know, Cenk and John, because the Israelis left Gaza. They had control of Gaza in 2005, and they disengaged. It was called the disengagement, and they did so with many Israeli businesses and many agricultural concerns in Gaza being burned and destroyed, and the Gaza Strip was turned over to the Palestinian Authority at the time. Now, I'm not suggesting that was a plan that was all designed to as an olive branch. In fact, if you really drill down, many Israelis who would say, no, it was designed to freeze the peace process at the time, to kind of prevent a permanent Palestinian state from being established. So there's a lot here. Look, what we can agree on, I think, without question, is most of what Cenk has just said, which is this is a humanitarian horror show, and I don't get the end. The one thing I would say is that the entire Knesset, the ruling parliament of Israel, doesn't agree with this. And as you know, Cenk, there are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Israelis taken to the streets who disagree with this as well. So I always hate it when Israel, which is clearly pursuing this as a government, horrifying, immoral policy, which is a jihad on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu. I hate it when too broad a brush is painted over the Israeli people, because there's a lot of pushback in Israel around this as well. And Netanyahu, as you know, Cenk, this is a policy to save his skin, because he is an outlaw. He's a lawless leader, just like Donald Trump. So there's a lot going on here. There are a lot of cross currents, but most of all, this is an absolute humanitarian crisis of the greatest extreme.
Yeah, it's just real quick before we go to John again with more updates from how the world's reacting to what Mark said. Yes, Israel withdrew from Gaza 20 years ago, but people say that as if Gaza had sovereignty. The Palestinians were a state. No, they were not a state. They didn't have any sovereignty at all. The minute they did anything that Israel disagreed with, they would get bombed. They didn't control their own borders. They had to go through humiliating checkpoints. They couldn't even come close. If they came within a couple hundred yards of the fence, the current IDF head, who at the time was in charge of the wall, would order that they be murdered. They could be murdered at any time by Israel. They had no sovereignty at all. So I don't want people thinking, oh, well, they gave them Gaza and then look at what they did with it. No, that wasn't a real state, and there's some chance that it was a trick, as Mark alluded to. Now, to the Israeli citizens, look, I feel conflicted about this. On the one hand, there's polling that shows that they want them to keep going in Gaza. The majority in Israel do, and that is disheartening. And that is a coarsening of the culture that is heartbreaking. On the other hand, Mark's absolutely right. There are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of protesters in Israel. There's a lot of people who want the hostages back, know that this is a problem. And yes, plenty of people who think that enough already in what you've done in Gaza. And not only is it hurting the Palestinians, but they rationally conclude that this is harming Israel significantly in the world stage and with America, etc., let alone their former prime ministers and the former heads of Shin Bet and some former IDF soldiers, let alone the Jewish community worldwide, the top rabbi in America, the top Holocaust historian in America, etc. All the way down to the people confronting Alan Dershowitz says he's being banned from buying a pierogi. And he's like, you're an anti-Semite, you're an anti-Semite. They're like, I'm Jewish, right? So all these activists who've been pushing for peace and trying to do the right thing. Unfortunately, governments sometimes turn into a horrific situation, and that's what's happening with the current Israeli government, John.
Yeah, and the devastating thing is, if, I mean, they get a lot of negative pushback. If they take the land, then they have it. They have it for effectively forever. That seems to be the calculation. Russia obviously knows that they look terrible with what's happening in Ukraine, but look at the deal that apparently Trump and Putin have agreed to. They get to keep all the land. And so that's the world order that's being set up. You can invade, you can commit war crimes, ethnically cleanse areas, and who's gonna stop you? Who's gonna stand up to, is the UN gonna do something? Especially with Trump in power, he supports all of this. These are his buddies. Or worse than buddies in the case of Netanyahu, where he's clearly the submissive in the relationship. That said, we're gonna get to those reactions really fast. I should let you know, they say Palestinians have until October 7th, conveniently, to evacuate Gaza City, and that's where they're going to launch their ground invasion. As was said in that video, many do not plan to leave or can't conceivably. I mean, these are people who've been starved. Like, what are they gonna do? Like, how are they gonna do that? And so God only knows how many people are gonna die as a result of that, if they even wait until October 7th. Here are some satellite images showing the massive and rapid buildup of infrastructure and military vehicles. Now maybe those were moved there so that they could just sit for several months without being used. I guess that's possible. I'm old enough to remember what happened when Putin had built up all of his forces over the border from Ukraine, saying they weren't gonna use it, so we'll see. As Cenk has been saying, there has been significant backlash, not only from some of the forces he was talking about inside of the United States, obviously the UN, Europe as well. The Hostage Families Forum, organization representing the families of the hostages still remaining, put out a statement saying, we are appealing to the cabinet. The expansion of the fighting is a danger of death and immediate disappearance for our loved ones. Look us in the eye when you choose to sacrifice them. And so that is a good statement. They're obviously scared about what might happen to their family members. But we've been covering this for a very long time, and I feel like there's always a point in one of these big stories where we get to a statement from the families of the hostages, and they're always being ignored. Netanyahu does not, he's barely even pretended to care about what they think about this. And as Cenk said, former Israeli leaders, political, military, have put out statements as well. The Israeli opposition leader denounced this move, saying that the invasion could lead to many other disasters, not only the deaths of the hostages and the killing of many soldiers, but tens of billions of dollars in costs, as well as diplomatic bankruptcy. Which that same sort of comment, Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister, had written in the end of July an opinion piece talking about Israel becoming a pariah state. So that's sort of now out there, this concern that you are doing very long-term damage to the reputation of Israel by continuing this. You have 550 former Israeli security officials, including the former head of Shin Bet, sending a letter to Donald Trump saying, it is our professional judgment that Hamas no longer poses a strategic threat to Israel. And our experience tells us Israel has all it takes to deal with its residual terror capabilities, remotely or otherwise. Of course, I understand that they're trying to appeal to Donald Trump. The idea that Hamas posed a strategic threat to Israel before all of this is absurd. The idea that they posed a significant tactical threat is kind of stretching things. But even they're admitting, come on, what are they going to do? Like pretending that you need to ethnically cleanse the entire Gaza Strip because of Hamas, that just does not, it's ridiculous at this point. But unfortunately, as we've covered on the network, as I'm sure they've covered on the Young Turks, earlier this week, Donald Trump, like a beaten dog, in his press conference just says, well, it's gonna be whatever Netanyahu wants it to be. This guy that loves throwing his weight around, silverback gorilla, alpha male. Not with Netanyahu. It's whatever the dude wants to do.
Yeah, and notice, so everybody in Hezbollah leadership is dead. Everybody in Hamas leadership is dead. And Israel used to use the excuse of Hamas fires rockets into Israel. I'll tell you why I call it an excuse in a second. But notice they haven't done that in a long time because there are no rockets left because there's almost no Hamas left. So they don't have that excuse anymore. Did it stop them? No. And if all 20 of the hostages were killed today or returned today, it doesn't, better yet, returned along with the bodies, and Hamas got nothing in return, right? Do you think Israel would stop? There's no chance Israel would stop. They'd come up with a new excuse. And then our media would repeat that excuse as if it's legitimate, and then have a fake debate about it, and then Congress would send them another 5, 10, 20 billion dollars, right? So this has nothing to do with any of that. Can Hamas in the old days do some damage to Israel? Obviously, look at what happened on October 7th, right? But that was startling because it was so extraordinary, so rare that they could do that kind of damage. But that's the kind of damage that Israel does, I don't want to say daily, but some days, okay, but certainly weekly. Weekly in Gaza, Israel regularly murders that many people, right? So like the idea that the Palestinians are an existential threat to the best defended nation on earth is preposterous. The Palestinians are down to stones. And when they throw a stone, some terrorists, murder them, and they do in the West Bank, etc., right? That they're going to somehow defeat Iron Dome and Israel's nukes with rocks. This is an absurd, ludicrous thing, but all of our press repeats it as if it's, oh, no. The Palestinians are not under existential threat. It's not a problem that their state does not exist. Reality is not at all important. The fact that the Palestinians are in concentration camps, that they're being starved, that they've been brutally occupied by this despotic force for all of these years, not important and should never be discussed. But poor Israel is under an existential threat at any point. These Palestinians with their rocks and their fists are going to destroy all of Israel and kill all the Jews. It's ridiculous. It's not anywhere within a million miles of true. It's the reverse of reality. It's Orwellian to pretend that the Palestinians are the aggressors and Israelis are the victims. So no, it's not within a billion miles of true. So I'm gonna go to the last two things from me. Let's see if that turns out to be true. Civic Folly 86 wrote in from a member on Twitch. Israel already occupies 3/4 of Gaza. If they take Gaza City, it's 100% occupied. That's a great point. Like they say Gaza City, but there's nothing else left. So thank you for contributing to the show. That's terrific. And Rebel Dragon on TYT.com, a member on our website, said Israel kept insisting it's not an occupation. So what gives them the authority to even have a vote like this? So yeah, you tell me, oh no, we don't control Gaza. Okay, now we are going to decide what we're going to do in Gaza. And here, now we will tell the Palestinians what to do. And then lastly, okay, as I kick it back over to Mark, when Netanyahu and the other enormous liars that speak for the Israeli government now come out and go, oh, we're here to liberate the Palestinians. It's like, it's grotesque in every way. And if Israel was a government that I liked or loved, I would be 10 times angrier than I am now. Because then I would say, oh my God, not only are you slaughtering these Palestinians and doing it with American money and getting the whole world to hate you, but you're making this government and this country that I love, or let's put aside the government, this country that I love, as one of the most hated nations on earth, with great justification. And how did that help? How did that help Israel? To be absolutely loathed by the world as the entire world sees them starving babies to death. How did that help Israel? Oh, we're gonna get more land. Wow, okay, genocidal freak. I bet that keeps people safe in Israel. Their only threat to their safety, as they are the greatest, best defended nation on earth, literally no one else has Iron Dome. Only like 7, 8 other countries have nukes. And that's why when the IDF soldier earlier this week said, yeah, they told us to stand down on October 7th. Oh, the guys who targeted Hezbollah and Hamas with pinpoint precision, and the Iranian scientists, etc., with pinpoint precision, they couldn't respond, what, for 7 hours on October 7th, or however long it took for the IDF to walk over there? They didn't have cars, they didn't have ships, they didn't have anything. No, this is all total nonsense. They have genocidal freaks running that government now, and if you love that country, that should break your heart into 1,000 pieces, and you should be doing everything in your power to make sure that that guy's taken out of office. Mark, last words.
Well, the stench of this humanitarian horror will be something that, as you said, will change the face of Israel, and it's heartbreaking because there is so much great in history about Israel and about the people who live in Israel, and this is a horror show. And you're right; it's, as I say, the stench will overtake it, and it's indefensible. I want to go back to what you just said, though. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, Cenk. You're saying that the IDF deliberately stood down to allow October 7th to continue with the rapes, murders, and the destruction of October. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so I'm not saying it. An IDF soldier said it earlier this week. Okay, so I'm reporting it. Do I know that he is absolutely right? I don't know. Have Israeli officials conceded that they had the information about October 7th, but decided to dismiss it? They did. Right?
Yeah, that's
so
absolutely
you could
true.
say, you could put those things together and go, well, that paints an interesting picture, especially given the enormous capability of Israeli intelligence, right?
Sure.
But do I know it for sure? I do not know it for sure, and thank you for that clarification.
I mean, it's more than a little bit controversial, the notion that and there's a political price that's been paid and continues to be paid by Israelis toward their government because of October 7th, because you guys did know about this. You heard about these plans and you didn't take them seriously. To Cenk's point, you didn't think Hamas had it in them to actually pull this off. So I always feel like the Middle East this is horrifying. As I said, it's humanitarian awfulness that I can't even get my head around. And I always feel the Middle East is like a movie. It depends when you walk in. And boy, I walked in right now, and it is sadly, the Israelis are all bad on this one. And the only thing I would say about the Israelis, as I said at the beginning, is from people I've talked to, there are a huge chunk of Israelis who are not good with this. They hate this and they don't want it to continue. But this government has been hijacked by Netanyahu, and he's on a jihad, and it's a horror show.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.